Getting a little bit better with the whole like music and audio, and
there's a learning curve to the whole streaming process. For some people it takes a couple of episodes. For us it takes much longer.
Anytime you want to run the show here, you feel free.
No, I said us. I don't know why you feel so attacked on that. But
I think I know why.
Oh,
but.
Okay. Well, I was going to say that there is a lot of things that happen at TFSX, and this is just one of them, and it's expertly done.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Nicole says we sound good.
Excellent.
So
I'm
good.
always concerned. There's multiple ways to hook up mics in the studio, and I'm always concerned about what all of you are hearing. But, if Nicole, who is basically the heart and soul of TFSX, says it sounds good,
it's true.
Then it sounds good.
Yeah, so here we are. I always have to like check myself because it's like, obviously we record a lot of stuff in this studio. And
True.
Some of it live, lots of it not. So I have to think like, should we be talking about like what day it actually is? And I feel like we can because we're live. So we could actually talk about
Yeah, no, I mean,
we're at the end of May.
If there's any day that you should be able to say, this is the actual day. In other words, when we're recording a podcast, sometimes you don't want to say like,
no.
Hey, so today is, because it's recorded, and then it doesn't get released for another week or 2 weeks.
Let's be clear. We're very rarely ahead of schedule, but we are sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes we are. But it is good when your content is more evergreen.
Yes.
And this podcast in particular is helpful for it to be evergreen because it's part of a course and
that's right.
All that good stuff. So, yeah. So, welcome to Wicked Opportunities Live.
Yes, another rendition of
rendition. Yeah.
Of what we affectionately call TWOP. It's the Wicked Opportunities podcast.
But in this very affectionate.
This particular case live, so TWOPL, the Wicked Opportunities podcast live.
TWOPL. We ran into someone recently. Every once in a while we get out of the office.
Tanya says, did you know that Nicole's my hero? I feel like there's a song.
Did
you know Nicole's my hero?
Well, she's got the little music thing, so she gets it. She gets it. So we don't often get out of the office, but we're starting to get out more. Yay.
There's a little bit more.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And so we were out last week, in Atlanta and San Diego.
Back to back. So we flew from here to Atlanta.
Which I cannot believe.
We were there for 5 minutes and we left straight for San Diego.
I cannot believe that we used to travel literally like Australia one week, the next week Japan, the next week Europe. Like, I don't even want to think about what we did to our bodies during that time period. I miss it. I miss it terribly.
I'm glad that, that's why I have all the aches and pains.
But I'm glad that I was younger when that happened.
I'm glad that it happened. Don't be sad for what doesn't. It's not going on anymore.
But like living through the last week, which was like, oh gosh, 2 back-to-back domestic flights.
Yeah, no.
I mean, we had some excitement at the airport. So I can't believe on Friday I was like actually worried about getting our steps in, because we got the steps in and then some. So anyway, the whole point of me saying that is that we got to see people IRL, and as the kids say,
as the cool kids would say.
And it's sort of crazy because people are like, oh my gosh, I listened to your podcast. I watch your live stream.
Yes.
Which is, it's still weird to me, but I mean, it's cool. It's fun.
We had somebody from a university in Canada come to us.
That's sort of who I was thinking of.
And say like, oh gosh, I've been listening to the IDGs podcast. So it's nice to know that somebody is listening. And it turns out there's more than just a couple of somebody's listening. But when you're on this side of the microphone and the camera,
screen, you don't
sometimes you don't know.
No, yeah. I mean, I think it's truly sort of interesting to reflect on, I mean, obviously we did things virtually, pre-pandemic, not to the extent that we did during the last 3 years. And, moving virtually and having everybody embrace more of the virtual learning and experiences has propelled that part of our business, like many others, has accelerated that, right?
Yep.
And so would we have a live stream? Would we have a podcast? Maybe, maybe not. Definitely I don't think would have been as progressed. And so to now circle back, to be back in person with people, and we so love that. We love this, but we also love that. It's fun to see, I think, the synergy between those spaces, and to know that, people listening to this either live or on the recording, hopefully we have an opportunity at one point or another to cross paths, either live online where we get to have more of a two-way conversation, or in person, which was really, really exciting. And to hear how this work is impacting people, which is really the reason why we do it.
That's right.
That was really fun. That was really fun. And she was great. She had a poster session, and that was really fun. So shout out to IASP, which used to be ASP.
Yeah, Association for
Strategic
Planning.
Yeah.
And now it's the International Association of Strategy Professionals.
Right, which I love, because we're all about changing our acronyms here. So you do you, boo. And then we were at ATD.
Yes, which is the Association for Talent Development.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they used to have a different name too, which I don't even remember what it was.
They did.
But,
and so I just want to say that
it used to be the American something or other. So now it's
it did.
It
did.
Yeah.
The ASP, which is now the IASP, they had a good turnout for their conference, because they're getting sort of back in the rhythm again, back in the saddle, as they would say. But, I mean, it's just two different animals, because, they had a great turnout for our AISAP, and they had, a core group of people who were concentrated and cared, and we had a great session. We had, a lot of people in our session.
A lot of engagement. A lot of friends, like a lot of former alumni. We had GFAC members in the audience.
We did. And an intelligence agency friends
don't
were
say
there.
too much.
I won't say who they were.
But it's very exciting when they show up.
But when you go to ATD now, it is what it is, because there's
tens of thousands of
people. Tens of thousands of people in a giant...
it's a sea of people at a convention center.
Yeah.
But
and you spoke on the last day. And I love what this gentleman said in a post on LinkedIn, because he said, God bless the people that show up for the last day of this conference, because at that point, everybody's toast.
Well, they've listened to 25 sessions on Chat GPT.
Right. and talent development, and they just have, their brains are full, and they just don't want to go to another session. And you still drew 100 people in your session, which was concurrent with 100 other sessions. So
there was a lot of sessions.
That's a
going
great
on.
number of people to come, and almost everybody in your session said it was the best session of the entire conference.
Yeah, no, it was great. I love ATD. We speak. There's a handful of conferences we try to speak at every year. The ACMP, the Change Management Professionals, the Strategic Professionals, IASP now, ATD, the Talent Development Professionals. We've always known that foresight, or always believed that foresight should be an operating system.
Yep.
So we've always attempted to go beyond foresight and futures conferences. We love to speak at those too, but you're talking to other futurists, so it's like it's a bit of an echo. I love going and introducing foresight to new groups.
It's so much better.
And when I sat there and told these talent, learning and development leaders that they need to be futurists, because how can they develop learning to develop people for the future if they themselves don't understand what's happening in the future? And
right.
I was really excited to get them away from the narrative of AI is going to take our jobs, and a lot of the sessions were like, how do I use ChatGPT to create training or whatever, and so I really challenged them to think differently about what is happening right now, what can happen in the future, and our role and our responsibility.
Yes.
To be the stewards of the type of world that we want.
Right.
And so, those platforms give you an opportunity to have those conversations, to engage with new people that aren't part of the field. We love working with our alumni and with other foresight professionals, but man, there's an exciting thing that happens when you're the first to tell someone, hey, there's a field called foresight. I still can't believe there are people that don't know about it, but there's lots and lots that don't know about it.
And so there's a bit of a dichotomy about that too, because there's a lot of people still don't know, and if everybody thought this way, the world would more than likely be a better place.
Right.
And so that's why it's so exciting to introduce people to foresight. I mean, if you go to a conference with a bunch of futurists, it's just like any other conference. If I go to a medical conference with a bunch of doctors and I'm a doctor, they're all just trying to outdo each other in some way. Mm-hmm. But when you go to a conference where people are like, sharing information and willing to receive, and they're learning about something for the first time, it's super exciting. And the more people we can get to think about futures thinking and think from a platform of futures thinking, the better off we're all going to be.
Yeah, and that's why the inner development goals are the core of our podcast this year.
That's right.
The 23andMe series continues. And as you all probably know, the way that we've structured this year's podcast, I hope we keep doing it this way. We'll have to talk to the people in charge and see if we can keep doing it this way. I love
see what happens.
Kicking off each new segment of the podcast, in this case, each new IDG dimension or domain, with a live stream. And so if you've been around, you know that there are 5 domains of the Inner Development Goals framework. And for those of you that may not be familiar, the Inner Development Goals framework was developed by a group of thought leaders, global thought leaders, several years ago. And it was an answer to a gap they felt was happening as it relates to the Sustainable Development Goals, which I think most everyone knows about, the SDGs.
Yeah, right. And of course, the SDGs are super important, but what these individuals, like the Presidency Institute and people from Harvard, Yale, and MIT, and those fancy halls of academia, but probably even more importantly, from on the ground, individuals who are working on social, environmental, economic issues, people issues, really understood that we're not getting any traction on the SDGs, or not the traction that we should be getting, because it's not about trying to do something or an end goal. It's about the way that we think and the paradigms that we live in.
Yeah.
I was reading this great article this past week by Naomi Klein in The Guardian, and of course she's a well-known writer and philosopher, and she was writing on the hallucination story that people say that AI is AI is hallucinating, which is so cool because it means it's gaining sentience and all, but it's really just because it's broken and it doesn't work very well. And she was saying, the people that were really hallucinating were the developers of AI. And this relates to this idea about the paradigm we live in, because she said, can you imagine thinking that AI is going to solve all the world's problems from being developed within the paradigm that it's in? It's not, and so it's the same thing for the SDGs. You could put these things out there and they're not going to change the world if you're still operating from a hyper-capitalist, hyper-consumptive. You haven't changed any of that. And so the IDGs are so important because they say, look, we have to be, we have to think, we have to relate, we have to collaborate, we have to act, and all of the 23 skills and traits that are housed therein. And if we host those, if we house those internally, both individually and collaboratively, then we're going to almost naturally perform the SDGs, right?
The issue with the SDGs is that they're a measure of output.
Yeah.
And we are hoping that if we measure things, that somehow it'll result in transformation. And all that does, if you don't do the inner work, the work to change paradigms, the work to change systems, is something like the SDGs, people just begin gaming the system, because if it's just about the numbers at the end of the day, then the buybacks and this and that, and it just becomes a game to try to best these metrics. And so I love that they did the work to do the research around these 23 traits that they feel are the key to equipping our society with the ability to navigate the increased complexity that is, right now creating all the issues that we're seeing. So they are, in essence, in alignment with Wicked Opportunities, which, again, our Wicked Opportunities podcast and the brand around the Wicked Opportunities. The idea here is that, our complex environment is not the problem. It's our outdated mindsets that cause the problem. So we like to flip the idea of wicked problems or complex problems on their head and use foresight to fuel solutions and new types of thinking. And so, again, there could be no better, I think, synergy than between what the Inner Development Goals framework and initiative have put forth and natural foresight and strategic foresight as an operating system. They're really two pathways that converge beautifully. And that's what we've been exploring in the podcast series, this collection. We've worked our way through being and thinking. So being, as a reminder, was the relationship to self. And there were some great traits within the being domain. For those of you that may not be aware, we have released the first asynchronous course. And it is under that being domain. So what we've done is we've taken the content from the podcast and we've really blown it out. We've given you additional readings and articles and content and tools to be able to, if you're looking for support in developing these traits. So the podcast is great because it continues to be free. So if you just want to be informed and listen in, that's still available. But if you're looking to apply this thinking and develop these inner traits, then we encourage you to check out the course. There'll be a course for each one of the domains. So being, thinking, relating, collaborating, and acting. So the being and the thinking podcasts are out. The being course is also out. The thinking course hopefully will follow shortly.
It's coming. It's on its way as well.
Hey, if you've never developed an asynchronous training course, let me let you in on a little secret. It's a shit ton of work. That's the secret.
It is I guess I need to cuss as well. It's a shit ton of work.
When you say it like that, it feels very forced. And I need it to come from within
natural,
you. I need it to just come from within you. Look, the live stream, one of the benefits, there's a couple of benefits for me for the live stream.
Yeah.
Is I feel like we get to be, the podcast is cool, but now that we're recording it for the course,
it has to.
We get a little bit more buttoned up on the podcast because I know I have to edit it later. So I try not to be too unhinged. But the live stream, I feel like it's like the old school podcast.
Yes.
We get to be a little bit more.
Be yourself.
So we get to be ourselves. I get to curse. That's 2. And number 3, I get to wear like my more crazy outfits. This isn't that crazy, but like, we have more conservative clients. So if we were on camera with a client, I'm not going to be wearing my Hello Kitty shirt that I've worn before, or my robot shirt.
ACDC shirt.
This is my mod dress. that I'm wearing today.
It does look very, I really love it.
It's
And it
retro.
has a 70s flair to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I was born in the 70s, so,
There you go.
there's that. There's
There
that. So we use the live stream to kick off the next domain. So today we're talking about relating. That's the third dimension of the Inner Development Goals framework, relating, which they summarize as caring for others and the world. I don't think it takes a lot of analysis to see how this fits in to the IDG framework and the, support of achievement of the SDGs.
Yes.
But yeah, our goal today in the live stream is to introduce you to this dimension, tell you a little bit about the traits that are within it. There are, looks like 4 traits.
4 traits in this dimension,
And let you know that over the next 4 weeks, you'll hear a podcast for each of these traits, and we hope you tune in for that as well.
Yeah, I just want to circle back to what you were saying a second ago too, as we're diving into the relating dimension of the Inner Development Goals. There's a couple of things. One is that these, we're relating the goals to foresight. So you already said this, but it's so.
Oh yeah,
important.
I sort of skipped over that. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, well, it's just I think it's.
Let's talk about because I feel like we always just assume we're so embedded in this stuff, and I feel like if you are not a stalker of us, that you just occasionally consume our content, that it's helpful to just pause here and talk about why we think the IDGs make such a good connection to foresight. Why are we spending an entire podcast collection on them? And I think you do such a good job explaining that.
I don't know if I do any better job than you do.
I feel like you do.
But that was the reason that we tackled them to begin with. I mean, as a standalone, we think the IDGs are really cool. But what makes them really cool to us is that these are the same traits that you would be honing to unlock your inner futurist.
Say more.
And so I was just thinking about a really big organization in another part of the world saying to us this week, this asynchronous course that you guys made about being, they sort of entered through that door. Mm-hmm. They didn't know there was a whole podcast behind it and everything we're telling you right now. But they were like, this would be great to use for our whole organization because we really care about foresight and we want people to develop these inner goals or these inner foresight traits.
Yeah.
So there's 23 traits in the IDGs, and reading through them is like reading through a list of the traits of what make a good futurist. And so that's why we're doing this. I certainly wouldn't have a problem just doing a podcast that was supporting the IDGs.
Right.
But the reason that we're doing this is because we're concerned about foresight and futures thinking. And we believe and we know that foresight starts, our good friend Marie Conway in Australia even calls this what she refers to this as pre-foresight. Mm-hmm. Before you go jumping into doing foresight with the tools and all this, you should really be doing this pre-foresight
you should
work,
ready yourself,
which is unlocking the inner traits and skills of what makes a good futures thinker or foresight professional or somebody who's thinking about the future on a regular basis, because we really can't approach the future properly and robustly and rigorously unless we're really approaching it through the lens of basically what these 23 IDG traits really get across to us.
Yeah, I think that circling back to what we were saying at the start of the live stream about engaging with the talent development, the learning and development participants that they've never heard of foresight. I think what makes the IDGs really cool is that it's a great entryway into foresight because people understand, for example, within relating, they understand the concept of relating. They understand the traits of appreciation and connectedness and humility, empathy and compassion. And so providing someone the link between that and a futurist mindset and a foresight practice is a lot easier than, in my opinion, than, starting cold or not having that bridge. Or traditionally we might use the bridge of strategy or competitive intelligence, which are also great. those functions. But then at that point, you're sort of unlearning some stuff to try to learn how to do it with foresight. Here, you're just meeting people where they are. And because we are such a big proponent of the future being about people, I think that's another reason why there's such a strong linkage and synergy between the IDGs and natural foresight. So for those of you that are listening, typically our podcast or live stream listeners aren't necessarily newbies, although they can be. We welcome you if you are. But we know many of you are looking for ways to bring others along. A lot of the people that are attracted to our content are folks that are establishing a practice, whether internally or hanging their own shingle. And we're always looking for ways to build a business case, to bring others along, to encourage people to go on this journey. And so I think this is a really great way to do that, because again, people have a working knowledge of these 23 traits. Yeah. So you're not trying to explain what a trend is or what the probability impact matrix is, right away. You're saying, look, we need humility, and here's why.
That's
and here's how this group of intellectuals and researchers have said this is the traits that are needed for success in a complex environment. So when our partners in corporate environments are looking to build talent of the future, and they're like, I need critical thinking skills, I need X, I need Y, here's the 23 things that you need to make sure that your talent has to be successful now and into the future. And it just so happens that when you develop and hone these traits, you're also developing really good futures thinkers.
That's right.
That are ready to then apply the tools of futures thinking to make those sustainable development goals a reality. And so it goes hand in hand. One promotes the other promotes the other. And that's why we get so excited about talking about the IDGs. That's why we have a podcast, a live stream series, a set of courses.
Yeah, I was going to say, and that's why we got super jazzed about making the asynchronous courses. And so hopefully you get a chance to dive into these 5 courses. Right now there's only one. It's on the being dimension, which is the first dimension of the IDGs.
Oh God, the thought that there's going to be 5.
But there'll be 4 more. There will be 4 more. And the good thing is they're all spread out, so you can just take the being one right now, and then you'll be waiting anxiously for the thinking course.
I need something else in my coffee for that too.
It's lots of caffeine and a little rum, so a little bit of rum.
Okay, so let's talk about relating. So again, relating is the 3rd dimension of the IDG framework. They encapsulate it as caring for others and the world. And then further, they define it as appreciating, caring for, and feeling connected to others, such as neighbors, future generations, or the biosphere. It helps us create create a more just and sustainable systems and societies for everyone. I mean, these things just make sense. I mean, I don't want to say they're just common sense, because I love that they are common sense, but we know common sense is not very common.
Yeah.
And so I feel like the other thing that the IDGs has given me personally is it's overwhelming to think about all the problems that are in the world right now. I mean, it really makes me emotional, and it's overwhelming. And I think about raising children and, what world we're leaving with them. And it's, it can be almost too much.
Yes.
I feel like this framework gives you a way to step through the possibilities and the potential and the solutions and the opportunities in a more manageable way that I can get my head around. And when people are pushing back on, wanting to use foresight or long-term thinking, we can bring it back to these things and say, okay, I also love relating, because this is one of the domains that if another foresight group, organization looked at the IDGs, they would not be in tune with relating as much as we are in tune with relating.
Yeah.
We literally talk about love on our podcast and about
absolutely.
And so I feel like all of the domains and dimensions are really powerful, but this one is really uniquely powerful, I think, from a TFSX natural foresight perspective, don't you think?
I do. And I wish that they would just name one of the
I
IDGs.
know,
Love
I
should be in
know.
there.
That's so funny that they probably had a conversation
They
about
probably
that.
had a conversation about it, and somebody said like, "Oh, it just seems too fluffy." But we really need to get to a place in our world, and Dr. Ryan Eisler, who has written some amazing books on nurturing humanity, and she wrote the famous book, The Chalice and the Blade. And about world economies and that kinds of things, and all that heady stuff that sounds very intellectual and sciencey. And she bases all of that on research and neuroscience around love, and that love literally is a stacked evolutionary component that helps our species to not only thrive, to be shepherds of the cosmos. And that's a good role for us to take, not dominionists, but shepherds, And so I say all that because, this domain, a dimension of relating, is really related to exactly that, is to being those good shepherds.
Yeah.
And I love that you read the description, because it's good shepherds of our neighbors, of future generations, and of the biosphere, the unfolding cosmos, and consciousness and planetary good and all of this good stuff. There's so much that I could say this week, because I've had a couple of conversations exactly about this aspect this week. And somebody said to me online this week, they were like, well, it sounds like you're talking almost in religious tones here, and the reality is that the universe is just as cruel as it is beautiful. And I'm going to contend that that's not true. How you like them apples?
Hey, it's a live stream. You can do it.
Because you could say, well, Frank, of course it is. There's no oxygen on Mars. Well, we don't live on Mars, and Mars wasn't necessarily made to. Maybe it was millions of years ago. Maybe there was a species there. I don't know. But there's nothing cruel about the fact that there's no oxygen in space.
Yeah.
And there's nothing cruel about an ant biting you, because that's what they do. But it is cruel for humans to be cruel to one another.
Cruel's a choice.
And cruel's a choice. It's a choice. It's not something that's inherent in the universe and the cosmos. Biocosmology, biocentrism, theory of adjacent possibilities, combinatorial innovation is not cruel. Yeah. That's just something we've made up in our heads. So, that's totally a human invention as well.
So mosquitoes next. Do mosquitoes next.
It's definitely cruel. Oh, and I see that you liked the article that said that you have to have a certain blood chemistry for mosquitoes to bite you.
You have to be real
They
sweet.
love you. They're not being cruel. They love you. They're loving on you.
No, what I was going to say too was, I don't remember which podcast it was, but from our first collection, when we were doing CLA and sort of the OG, the 7 shifts, I believe it was within that collection that we talked extensively about love in one of the podcasts.
We did. And an economy and a governance of love.
Right.
What would that look like?
Right. And
what would that look like?
I know.
It certainly wouldn't look like abusing one another and extracting from the earth and from one another.
And I will just say honestly that, because I feel like in the podcast and in the live stream, we can be a little bit more vulnerable and transparent, that when we recorded that podcast, I remember being really uncomfortable.
Yeah. I actually love that, because I feel uncomfortable saying it sometimes too, because I feel like, God,
really? I'm surprised, because
I feel like I don't have no matter what, you don't have enough ammo to come against the rest of the world that's going to be like, oh my God, get out of here. Let's do some real work. Yeah.
No, but I remember we were sitting right here in the studio, and, we always do a pre-walk. We always run through the we don't do it for the live streams. P.S. All of this is unscripted, but
that's what makes it so great.
No, I know. But when we do the episodes, we have a sense of where we're headed, and we obviously have conversation ahead of time. And Frank does an extensive amount of the research to prep for the shows. And when he said we're going to talk about leading with love and fueling our governance with love, and I remember thinking, oh my gosh, how is this going to go down? But I trust you, of course, as you know, implicitly. And
likewise,
I think that, what you offer to, not just to this field, but really to the world, is is really just so special because, it's so simple. It's so easy to be a futurist right now and just talk about AI and chat GPT and, and talk about the end of the world and talk about, all these things, and all due respect to our peers that, use their platforms that way. I'm going to argue that's the easy road. That's the easy road. That's the road that's expected. And when you go on these platforms and use your, the fact that that this platform comes with a ton of privilege, that when you use it to talk about love and to talk about empathy and to talk about how, we need to keep humanity in our future and keep humans in the future. It's not the most popular message right now.
It is not. It is not.
And you get a lot of pushback, and, we're not, you're not getting, we don't get as many like keynote requests and all that, because again, we're not talking about quantifying foresight. We're not talking about robots all the time. And we're not talking about how AI is going to solve everything or destroy everything. Those are the two narratives that you can use as futurists right now and be popular. And so I just have how much respect I have for you. And I think that,
Likewise.
It takes a lot to use your platform in a way that is not conventional, isn't going to gain popularity right now. But I promise you, when we talk about the appreciating, caring, and feeling for future generations, that's who we're speaking to.
Yep.
So if you found this recording 10 years from now, just know that we had your back, that we were talking about this in a way that we hoped would invoke change. And we're still hopeful of that. But again, it's not always the most popular. It's challenging even to ourselves. And so I just want to say that I appreciate you as one of the traits of relating.
Oh, well, thank you. And, I already know that. And I feel the same about you and the rest of the TFSX team, because to be in the TFSX team and even in the universe, of TFSX, these are the kind of people we have in here is, people that used to be an executive at NBC who now created a company that works on climate change and said, I'm done working at NBC. And it's not that NBC's evil or anything. That's not what I'm saying. Because we love to go into organizations and work with people, but we're always there as the court jester, because I'm not going to go into an organization and help them to build their competency in what they do without also challenging them in their competency about what they do. And I believe that a lot of the futurists and the people who are working inside the organizations who are futures thinking, they're trying to do the same thing.
Yeah.
Because it almost is impossible to be in this field and not know, at least inside yourself, that you can't just be towing the dominant narrative and the line, that futures thinking is going to press you into thinking about, are you doing the right thing? Are you caring about future generations? Are you leaving behind a world that, et cetera, et cetera? And if it doesn't do those things for you, then I would question, are you doing foresight and futures thinking at all? And that's why, deep and robust, rigorous futures thinking is going to make you say more than just like, I went on stage and talked about robots and AI. And quite honestly, if that's the futures thinkers you're listening to, run away. Run away from them. It's just such a waste of time.
I think it's hard. We could do a whole podcast or something. We'll have to talk about what it is around the paths that your foresight career can take, because it's super easy to get burned out.
Yeah.
It's super easy to get discouraged.
And it's super lazy just to talk about technology. It's laziness.
And welcome to the Wicked Opportunities podcast, where we offend everyone at one point or another. I opened the door for you.
I'm sure that the offense will be there, but I'm really trying to help.
No, I know.
Because
and again,
I'm guilty of the same thing.
This is what I'm saying. Look. What I was trying to say there. Lazy is one option. I'm going to have empathy here. I'm going to have empathy. I'm going to have empathy and compassion here, and I'm going to say, we've all been there in terms of wow, my message isn't getting through. People really don't care about the future. They don't care about the long term. They do. Everyone has this ability within them. We just need to unlock it. And it is, we're not going to, well, we did slight you slightly if you went down this path, but we're going to also acknowledge that we get it. It can be super frustrating to be day in and day out trying to work against systems that have been put in place to essentially
that's the thing.
Work short term. Like we're all working against these huge, gigantic, behemoth, archaic systems.
Yep.
Organizations themselves, capitalism, our governmental structures, the technology companies that make this live stream possible, they themselves work against the IDGs and the SDGs.
Every day.
Let's be clear.
Every day.
So it is not easy, and that's why we need a community. That's why we need to uphold each other and hold each other accountable when we stray. And that's what we're trying to say here. Look, we've been guilty of it too.
Oh, totally.
We need to not fall into the trap of executive entertainment.
Yeah.
We need to hold true. And so here's what I'll say. I'll say that if you feel like you have gone down that path, or you're tempted to go down that path, look at these IDGs. Are you cultivating within you these traits? Are you, when you're practicing foresight, are you practicing it with these traits?
Yes.
If you are not, then you need to go back and do some soul searching, because we need to practice foresight through the lens of appreciation, connectedness, humility, empathy, compassion, and the other 23 traits. So another way to use these IDGs is to check yourself before you wreck yourself.
I can tell you right now that the last few minutes of this podcast is going to be pulled out as a separate video, and I am putting it on my social media outlets. It's going to be a short little 3-minute video of us just saying that foresight in futures should challenge. If it's not challenging, it's not foresight in futures.
Yeah. All right, so relating, caring for others in the world, we love this dimension of the IDG framework. The traits, the 4 traits underneath this dimension are appreciation, connectedness, humility, and then empathy and compassion. They link together. So let's just talk briefly about each of these before we wrap up the live stream and give people a sense of what to expect coming forth on these podcasts, some of which are already in the can, as they say in the biz.
They are. Of course, that's how podcasting goes. You don't release it necessarily the same day that you do it. And of course, when you're working on 23 podcasts in a series and you're also building courses out of them, you've got to do them well in advance. And so I know for sure, I'm not even sure, I can't remember, but I know for sure I remember recording the appreciation and connecting.
Yeah, that's as far as we've gotten. We still need to do it.
And I think in the next day or two, there's the other 2 are going to be recorded.
Yep.
So, but we've already familiarized ourselves with all of this and done all the research, because we did that months ago on all of the IDGs. And remember, again, this is the relating domain or discipline.
Yeah.
So caring for others in the world, and you can see why appreciation, connectedness, humility, and then empathy and compassion are important traits inside of that idea of caring for others, feeling connected to them, to our neighbors, to future generations. We love to talk about, the fact that that's what we're really working for, is those who have not yet come, and the rights and the hopes and the dreams of those generations, and also of generations past. In our transformations retreat, and we had this awesome conversation yesterday about the next transformations retreat. Last year, we started off night 1 with all the participants just in the evening sitting out in the cool of the air around a fire talking about their ancestors, and everybody brought an artifact from the past. This is something my great-grandfather wrote in a journal, or this is a scarf that was handed down to me. I remember one participant brought shoes from like the 1920s. These are my great-grandmother's shoes. And we had stories around them, and it was connecting us to ancestors past, so that the next day we would have a greater appreciation for ancestors yet to come. And they were like
powerful. And
they didn't even know that. And then we got out in the woods and we were doing forest bathing, and we started talking about ancestors yet to come. And they were like, whoa, this is like last day's conversation, but we're not, like, what would be the artifacts of those ancestors? And we are those artifacts. And so we have to appreciate, connect, have humility, empathy, and compassion, so that we breed artifacts for the generations and the futures yet to come.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, we've already recorded the appreciation connectedness piece. Of course, this appreciation piece being all about gratitude and joy of our surroundings and the environments that I'm in. And you said earlier in the podcast that, we're living in we're living in a world that there's a lot of things going on, and climate change and racial injustice. And it's not that, past history hasn't had all of its problems as well. And many could say that it's just as hard in the past as it was today. But we're definitely living in a world that it's like you've got to seek out, purposely, intentionally seek out the gratitude and the joy.
Yeah.
And it's there. It's there for the taking. It's right there in front of us.
I think that this one, on the surface, appreciation as well, especially as it's linked to gratitude and joy, could, to some fall flat in the sense of like, there's a lot of the world that is still living in, what most would consider, impoverished conditions with, and so, but I do think what this is saying is that even in those instances, finding elements of appreciation, gratitude, and joy is critical for us to build trust and have connectedness to each other and to the world. And so I feel like this practice of gratitude is really powerful. And, what you're grateful for, where you have joy, where are you seeking and getting joy from? I think these are really important questions for us to ask ourselves, especially in a modern environment.
That's right.
And again, these are all linked. They're linked because they're in the same dimension, but they're also linked to the other 20, part of the 23 traits.
There's great. They did a good job with these IDGs because there's good overlap in all 23 traits and distinctiveness in all 23 traits. Yeah. And so if you've been following along, you've already seen that. And I love that you talk about like we need to intentionally seek out and find what brings joy to our lives, and then also find gratitude in those areas where we haven't before. And so we could go super cheesy here and say, it would help to meditate every day for 5 minutes, whatever. But actually, that's a good idea. It's like stop and smell the roses is not just a saying. It's like we need to really, and we do it in the practice all the time. As a matter of fact, we're usually running so fast that we.
Today has been a good example.
Yeah, and then we forget to like celebrate victories that we have every day here. And so we often talk about like, did we meet together? Did we get together physically? Did we celebrate that last thing that just happened? That person said an amazing thing. Stop. Have gratitude.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. You're not going to protect something and care about something in the long term if you don't have appreciation for it.
That's right.
So whether that is appreciation for our natural environment or appreciation for our society, for our earth, for each other, I think cultivating appreciation in terms of relating to others in the world is really, really critical, and it makes sense why it's part of these 23 traits. Again, aligned with the trait of connectedness, and we will have a whole podcast on this, but this idea of connectedness is really powerful because in a day and age where we've never been more connected, of course, many argue that we've never been more disconnected.
That's right. So, gosh, I love that thought. We could hang on that for a while, but, we're already nearing the end of our time here. But you just made a really powerful point. It's like technology. Here we go with the technology thing again. Because I am not a Luddite, and I am not anti-technology. But my statement this past week on that has been something that I think is super powerful. It's like if technology becomes an end goal rather than a co-aid, you got off the path.
Yeah.
It's always been a co-aid because humanity evolves alongside its technology, which also evolves with us. And that's just a part of what being human is. Technology is being human. But if it becomes more than a co-aid, it becomes an end goal. And we see that in the AI right now, then something's wrong. Yeah. But I say that because technology has connected us more than it has ever before and disconnected us more than it has ever before. Yeah. And that means something's wrong.
Yeah. I think, and again, we love the fact that we can share more and democratize this field even further because of the digital tools that we have. But I'm fond of saying that we weren't old enough for the internet as a species. And I think that's bearing true because we haven't cultivated these traits. So again, hear me. Whether you're going to practice foresight or futures thinking as a profession, it doesn't matter. To be a viable citizen in the society of today and in the future, we have to cultivate these traits. So if you cultivate a trait of connectedness in our individuals, in our children, in our adults, then using tools like the internet and social media becomes a help. It becomes a supporter of what we're trying to achieve. Right now, because we didn't have the building blocks, because we didn't have strong connectedness as a trait cultivated within us, unlocked within us. The result is the bubbles that we see. The result is that we see bullying. The result is that we see people that are lashing out because they are not mature enough, because they're not ready for the complexity that social media and these connective technologies unleash. And so it's not about getting rid of social media. It's not about clamping down necessarily. It's about equipping people so they act like adults. And they use these tools properly.
So powerful. It's something you just said. I hope people go back and listen to this again or just meditate on this for a while and have gratitude around this piece. And that is that stop trying to solve a symptom and go to the root. Clamping down on social media, it just will rise again in another form.
Yeah. You're suppressing all voices at that point.
You told the audience at ATD this past week something really powerful. You said people have said that AI will take away all our jobs. And then and years ago in the futures field, because futurists, so they were talking about it years ago, they were like, AI eventually will be able to write all the scenarios and do all the foresight and predict all the stuff.
Scan all the
and we
trends.
won't need it. And you were like, good luck. Because if AI, for instance, is going to be used to convince people with all of its reams of data about climate change and the necessity to make a change, we already had all that data. And that's not why people aren't changing their minds. They're not changing their minds because we're set in a paradigm that says to be successful, you got to make all the monies and buy secret islands and, stow yourself away and buy all the potassium pills,
But here's a scary thing about AI and these technologies is that it's very easy to create a false narrative. We've seen this happen, and we talked about it in a previous podcast. So if you don't have the critical thinking skills, if you don't have a society that's truly connected and grounded and able to understand and discern these messages and really be able to have, the appreciation and the connection as we're talking about in today's live stream, then things can go awry, and they are going awry pretty quickly.
That Naomi Klein in the article that I mentioned earlier about hallucinating and AI that was posted recently in The Guardian does a great job on the subject, where she talks about the fact that if we have a world of just mass information coming from AI and deep fakes and all of this, then there will be zero ability for us as infant humans, because we are not matured enough, obviously.
Clearly.
And we love to say it's just because we're flawed. It's not. It's not because we're flawed. It's because we're not grown up, and we haven't been working on developing a grown-up humanity. And because of that, it will be so easy to trick people that truth will be non-existent.
Yeah.
And so, my opinion here is that AI can certainly be used for good things, but we ought to clamp down on it and tell these companies that they could take it and stuff it where the sun don't shine.
Because there has to be governance.
We have to clamp down on this. We have to.
So the next trait is humility.
Yeah, and humility, and there you go, humility, right? Because we have to be able to work in accordance with the needs of situations, of people. We have to have the humility to know that we can't plow forward and do things just because we can. And it takes humility to see that, it's like we just can't be like, I'm going to work in Silicon Valley and get my Series A and all. That's not humility, because humility cares about people and about planet and about living systems, and we don't just say whatever, it doesn't matter. A lack of humility is narcissism.
Yeah. I feel like, our current environment does not help us cultivate humility.
That's right.
And I think you could spend a lot of time just talking about where the gap is, which we will in the podcast that we record about this trait, and why it's so critical to have humility as a good foresight professional.
Good foresight professional, because can you see now that's like without cultivating and continually cultivating humility, then where is your futures work going? Where's your foresight work going? Because if you lack humility in your foresight work, then you're not building the kind of work that says we could do this, but should we do this, and the ethics of it and all. So there's so much ethics and morals in the humility piece, and if you're not cultivating that, then what kind of foresight work are you doing, and what are you producing?
If you can't step away from your foresight work and say that I approached it from a selfless lens, then again, there's some soul searching that needs to happen. Why are you doing the work that you're doing? And where's the value that you're generating from it, and all of that good stuff. So, and then last but not least, I think this is where we get the closest to love on this, although I think collectively you could think about this as having love throughout it. But empathy and compassion is the last trait within the relating dimension of the IDGs.
And I wrote an article in 21 about this called The Heart of Foresight. And so it's on Medium, but I think we also have it under our articles in our various websites and our LMS and in the just the regular tfsx.com website. That the Heart of Foresight is care, empathy, reconciliation, and love, and leaning on people like Dr. Ryan Eisler and Carol Sanford and the famous anthropologist Aaron Manning and so many others who have done all the hard work in the research. Anthony Hodgson, who is a foresight professional too and has his own organization, that have really shown that these are cooperative evolutionary traits of emergence perception, which we talk about when we talk about holoptic foresight, the many-eyed foresight. Holoptic being many-eyed. And that really allows us to express a foresight that cares about where things are going, that cares, care. And that's what empathy and compassion are all about. It's about care, right? And so the ability to care where this is going and to build futures that are transformational, and that our emergent novelty is based on what wants to evolve in living systems. And so without that empathy and compassion, then we're going to build these just really rotten, stinking futures. And so that's why at the heart of foresight must be empathy and compassion, reconciliation, care, and love.
I would love to see a future where our organizations and institutions are evaluated as much as
why not
by their ability to care, love, and have empathy as they are by their profits.
Why aren't those the metrics? Why aren't those the metrics? And I would contend that those aren't the metrics because those metrics would get in the way of systems that say, I don't care, I don't have empathy and compassion. All I care about is that we meet the quarterly, thing.
Until you value the things, you're not going to figure out how to measure them.
The gentleman who created the original triple bottom line and talked about also quadruple bottom line, later wrote that he regretted that it just completely got co-opted. I wrote a whole article on this. You can find this on Medium as well. It's about transformation is the future. And in that article, I really expounded on the fact that, the creator of the triple bottom line, planet, profit, and,
purpose,
people, it said it got co-opted because they started using it as a measurement of financial ability.
It's the same as what happened with the SDGs.
Yeah. And he said, that's not what I meant. I meant that you could be financially prosperous if first you cared about people and planet, and they flipped it the other way around, and they were like, can we see whether we're making enough money from the, and so and you can read all about that, but yeah, I mean,
we've seen foresight get co-opted similarly.
Well, this is why I bring this up, because it's like of course everything's going to get co-opted by the present paradigm we're living in, and foresight needs to stand strong and say you won't co-opt me, so. Yeah. That's I not only challenge, but I encourage, and I plead with my fellow foresight professionals and people who want to be futures thinkers to not allow yourself to be co-opted. Yeah. Let's use this to challenge and to prosper the world. Yeah. Because we'll prosper if we all think this way.
We really will. Excellent. Well, with that, we are, I guess, officially sort of halfway through this 23andMe collection in many ways. This is the third of 5 live streams. We have a couple more coming. Stay tuned for the podcast that will be dropping as we go along this journey as well. We did have to shift the date of this one. So, yes. But I know many of you are probably catching it on the recording. So thank you to you all for watching and listening in. And again, if you're looking to learn alongside us, please join us on my.tfsx.com, where you can not only experience the recordings of the podcast and the live streams, you'll see recordings of our Global Foresight Advisory Council. Our last panel was phenomenal. So if you didn't see that, you definitely need to catch that. But in addition, you'll find community on my.tfsx.com, as well as the ability to take part in these asynchronous courses. We're adding more courses every day. Very soon, we'll be dropping our scenario course. There's already a course to help you prepare for certification. Yep. I mentioned the IDG course, the first of 5, Unlock Your Inner Futurist course on the being dimension. So lots going on there, as well as our ongoing live courses. We have our next one in August. So if you're looking for our foundations training, that next one is in August. 3 days to really build your foresight toolkit. So we're well into summer, day 1 of summer around here. School ended yesterday. So that's always fun.
That marks the beginning of summer. So.
Yeah, that's always fun here when you're balancing a few more things, but it's nice not to have to get up at the crack of dawn. I will say that.
I could tell summer started today because when I left my housing complex,
there wasn't as much traffic.
There wasn't a bunch of traffic, and even though there are signs there that says school zone 20 miles an hour, everybody was doing 40.
Huh. So, that actually sounds like a regular day. Sounds like a regular day. Sounds like a regular day. All right, friends. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time on all of our platforms, but specifically on the live stream with the Wicked Opportunities podcast. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
See you soon.